Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Musician's Mentor podcast. I'm your host, Travis Mark, and today I have the distinct privilege of speaking with the one and only Mr. Jim Riley. Many of you may know Jim from his work with the band Rascal Flatts. He's also currently on tour with Gary Levox and has credits that just go on and on and on. He has appeared on shows like the Grammy Awards, The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, The Tonight Show with David Letterman. He has been on Oprah. He's been on everything, American Idol, you name it. Jim's also a big advocate for drum education and does private lessons via the Drum Dojo, as well as drumset studies at Belmont University. And we talk about all of this and more in this interview. But before we get started, as usual, please, if you're getting anything from these episodes, do me a favor and leave us a rating or review on your favorite streaming platform. It really helps us. I appreciate it. But ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the one and only Mr. Jim Riley.
Hello.
Hey, Jim. It's Travis. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, man. Good. Thanks for doing this. Let's get started. What I typically do is I ask every guest that comes on the show, as weird as it is, to actually give yourself an introduction. That way our listeners know where you're coming from, a bit about you as a person, and they might even get a little bit of an idea of your headspace during the course of this interview. So if you wouldn't mind, tell us who Jim Riley is.
Hey, everybody. My name is Jim Riley. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts. Went to college at University of North Texas. I moved to Nashville in 1997 in pursuit of just a career at the highest level of the music business. And I've been fortunate enough to so far have a really great career. I spent 2 years with a guy named Mark Chestnut, who's a real big singer in the 90s. And then I took a chance to try to play with some friends of mine who just got in a record deal. Ended up being Rascal Flatts. We did a beautiful 20-year run there. I've been married also for 20 years. I've got 3 kids. And when I am not playing on the road, I am teaching and recording. Teaching is a big passion of mine. I spend a lot of time with it. I've already taught 4 lessons today, and this podcast is the last thing I have got on my books, and then I'm going to spend the rest of the evening with my family.
Incredible. There's a few things that I'll probably dissect from that, but let's, for now, just stay on track. I know that education's really important to you. I know that you have taught at several universities and you've got your drum dojo. I also know that you attended the University of North Texas, which I've never met a drummer that attended University of North Texas that hasn't been a complete monster. I mean, there's been some monster players out of there. Would you tell us a little bit about your experience at the University of North Texas? And then I know that you briefly touched on it in your introduction, but just tell us about, your overall thoughts on music education as it stands now. I know you're a big advocate for it, but do you think where it stands in the current climate with, the sort of click of a button type mentality, what are your thoughts about where it's gone?
Yeah, so a little bit about North Texas and my experience there. I actually got there the last year that it was North Texas State University. So my band director in high school had actually gone to North Texas in the 60s. He was a trombone player. He was a fantastic musician. Had played with people like, Buddy Rich. And, he was really world class. And so he turned me on to North Texas. I decided it was the best school for me. I went down there, but I really didn't know how tailor-made it was for what I wanted to do until I got there. And what I didn't realize is that the percussion department was just absolutely the pinnacle of, percussion departments. It's the percussion department that basically every percussion department is modeled after. And it's much larger than just about everybody. You know, you go to an average university, a good university that's got a great program, they may have 25 or 30 majors. At North Texas, they have like 200 percussion music majors. It's completely insane. So I like to joke that North Texas was a little bit like Roach Motel. They used to have these ads where roaches, you know, it's easy for the roaches to get in, very difficult for them to get out. And I felt that way about North Texas. It was very easy to get in. I did not have great grades. I got in no problem. And getting out was difficult because of, you know, it was a very rigorous program. You know, there was a lot of people, if they were like a jazz studies major, if they didn't make a jazz band by the beginning of their junior year, they might as well just change their major because they weren't going to get a jazz studies degree unless they had like 6 semesters of lab band and they had run out of time. So they would have to change majors. Now, I was a music education major, so I didn't need the jazz bands. And so in some ways, I probably ruined some guy's life because they didn't get to play in jazz band because I was playing in one of the bands. But for me, I had a really great time trying to do as much stuff as possible. I was playing in the drum line. I was playing in the jazz bands. I was playing in the symphony orchestra. I was playing in the graduate level percussion ensemble, one of 2 students that was an undergraduate playing in there. I was playing in the African ensemble, the Javanese gamelan ensemble. I mean, just about everything that I could do. And that really helped shape kind of my view of just the more I know, the more I can, you know, work as a professional musician mentality that I've continued on with. So I got my degree from North Texas, and I actually very accidentally started teaching in Texas. I had kind of a band director spot that was really like a percussion specialist, and it's a job that everybody wanted. I kind of, you know, just fell into it, and I quit that job because I realized that this was a really nice job. It was a really enjoyable job. It was a really fulfilling job, and it was keeping me from my dream, which was to move to Nashville and become a really high-level professional musician. So much to my parents' chagrin, I quit my job as a band director, and I ended up moving to Nashville to pursue my career.
Ballsy, man. Like a lot of people, I have this discussion with almost everybody. A lot of people don't know if they should take that step at a point. And often you meet the people of a certain age that always regret never taking it. But it's like to have the courage to do it, that's really quite something, you know?
Yeah, I did it like at least 3 times in my career. Like, and I think that it's because I have a character flaw where I think that nothing is going to go wrong.
Good flaw to have.
Yeah. So, like, you know, I quit that job, and then I ended up, you know, kind of really drifting around a little bit, and then I moved up to Kansas City to play on a buddy of mine's record. And then when I finally moved to Nashville, you know, I mean, I was giving up everything I was building in Kansas City, you know, to go there with nothing. I had no connections. You know, moving to Nashville was a big move. And then leaving a job with an artist that had over a dozen #1 hits to go play with your buddies that just got a record deal whose career could be over by July. And, you know, that was another big kind of like, you know what, I'm going to take this because I said, I'm young, relatively young at that time. And I was like, I'm just willing to take the risk. I'm willing to put it all on the table and go, you know what, if this doesn't work out, then I'll just keep playing and I'll just keep gigging and I'll work it out. But if it did, which it did, you know, it ended up really paying dividends and allowed me to have, you know, the kind of career that I wanted to have where, you know, I could do things on a really high level, from touring to recording to, you know, all that kind of stuff.
That's incredible. You bet on yourself and you won. That's amazing. What about the current state of music education? What are your thoughts?
As it pertains to what?
Just the fact that, like, and I don't want to turn this around that I'm talking more than you, but
No, I want to hear a little bit of what your concerns about it, and then I will tell you. Believe me, I won't be influenced by what you say. I have my own very specific thoughts about it, so I'll be happy to tell them. And I just want to hear kind of like what your concerns are.
Okay, so if I think back to when I first started drumming, right, and we're talking like over 2 decades ago, to find a drum teacher was quite difficult. And then when you did find somebody, it was usually...
Was that in London or South Africa?
That was in South Africa. We didn't have, obviously, the invent of clicking a button on YouTube and typing how to play whatever song on drums or how to play a rudiment. I didn't even know what rudiments were back then, obviously. Mm-hmm. But so now we've got this. Right now, anything we want's at a touch of a button, which I personally think is incredible. Where I think the problem becomes a little bit saturated, if you will, is there's no buffer as to what is good material, what is bad. So if you're a young up-and-comer wanting to learn, it's great, there's all this information, in my opinion. But what if you're choosing the wrong information? And so this is I mean by what do you think about the music education where it stands now? Because obviously there are platforms that are incredibly, incredibly large that if people do their research, they can find those platforms. And if you're in certain cities like Nashville or New Orleans or stuff, there are certain guys with reputations that if you ask around, you can find the better teacher, if you will. Mm-hmm. But for the guys who aren't in those kinds of cities, how do they, keep head above the overflown waves, shall we say?
Yeah, so I think all of that's a really great topic. I had a guy ask me the other day, do you have any tips on how to get started teaching? And the first question I ask at that point, and I'm always asking this from a very innocent point of view, is, tell me what makes you qualified to be teaching, and listen, if someone asked me, I would tell them, I've dedicated my life to playing drums. I started studying when I was 12. I didn't stop till I was like 22, 23. I've had this, professional career where I've done things on this incredibly high level. And I've always thought about it from the perspective of a teacher, and I'm trying to impart my knowledge. And then at that point they go, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds pretty good. And essentially, when I got the job teaching at Belmont University, essentially they asked me that. They asked me to write essays about my teaching philosophy and what I felt like I had to give to the students there. So I think it's a fair question to ask anybody, because I don't think anybody should be teaching any more than I should be teaching, how to build a deck. By the way, I have 2 guys in my backyard building a deck because I don't know how to build a deck.
Me neither.
You know what I'm saying? So, it's like there's things I'm not going to teach because I don't know enough about.
Yeah.
There is an overflow of information. In some ways it's incredible. In other ways, it's very intimidating. When I was in college and they would say, hey, these are the records we want you to listen to, we'd have to go check them out at the library, at the college. Now, almost every record that's ever been made, I would say greater than 99% of records that have ever been made are available on our phone.
Yeah.
So then we go, well, what do we listen to? It's almost like when you have everything, you have nothing. But when I was a kid and I had 6 or 7 records, I wore those things out because they're all I had.
True.
So it's different. Now, I've done things with, some of the big websites, like Drumeo. I've worked with Drumeo. I think they're fantastic. I know, people like Mike that does Mike's lessons.
Yeah.
I've got, other friends that do that. And I think that it's really fantastic and also can be daunting when they're successful, because then, like, for example, Drumeo, they have so much material they've done. They're almost like their own internet.
Yeah.
So then it becomes a problem. How do they organize their own library of just a massive amount of information? And it becomes just as daunting as the internet itself. And that's a big challenge that Jared has had to hit over there. And he obviously, he does a really great job. But people need the information. They need the same information they have always needed. They just are starting to get that information in different ways than they did before. When I was a kid, it was all about, albums, vinyl albums, and then it was about tapes, which were awful, and it was always about books. And so for me as a music educator, one of the real landmark things in my career was writing my first book, writing my second book, writing my third book, because to me, books mattered. And now, you know what? Books don't matter as much as they did. They may not even matter as much as they did 5 years ago. So I'm having to deal with the reality that people want the information. They just need to receive it in a different way. And that's when the inevitable, like doing things on the internet becomes a priority. So that's kind of where I'm at, and that's something that I wrestle with. I always get my projects done, but I never get them done on time. I take my time and I get them done. But I mean, I definitely have some projects to put more of my educational stuff online, and I am going to make that a priority.
Sounds good, man. Please keep me posted, and when you do, I'll obviously share it through the network, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
Now, okay, jumping back to your career, you left Kansas City, you left Mark, you took the chance on Rascal Flatts, which obviously did incredibly well.
Yeah.
Away from being the drummer in the band, you're also the band leader. So could you tell us a little bit about some of your responsibilities as a band leader, and what are some of the ups and downs of taking on that extra role within a group?
So for me, when I was a kid and I was in high school and I was in band, I mean, just being realistic, I was and I am very gifted at music. And so as a high school kid, I mean, I probably had some sort of ADHD or something. It was for sure undiagnosed, but I had a real problem with being able to behave myself when I was even in high school. And one of the things that my band director did, which I think was genius, was he didn't take things away from me. He put more on me. So he said, now you're in charge of the drum line. You have to write the music for the cadence, and you have to teach them all of the music for the band. That's your responsibility now. And I found that when I was given more responsibility, I actually responded better. So that was just something I knew about myself. I have no shortage of musical opinions, and I have no shortage of, just feeling comfortable talking and giving direction and having the heart of a teacher. So for me, it was a very natural role. When I joined up with the Rascal Flatts guys, they already had a keyboard player who was their musical director. They had a fiddle player, and then they added me in last. And so I was not the musical director, band leader, anything. And after about a year of them playing on the road, I got a call from their management, and they said, we don't want to change any of the personnel up, but the guys would feel more comfortable if you would take over as band leader and musical director. And they just feel like you have a better idea of, their vision for what they're looking for. And I think they were probably right, because, I mean, I was the guy that, stuck with them for their whole career. And, I was able to, be that kind of consistent voice in that department. And so as far as responsibilities. I mean, you're responsible for hiring musicians. Sometimes you're responsible for firing musicians. You're responsible for making sure that they are informed. You have to make sure that they are prepared. Now, if you hire great professional musicians, a lot of them are like a self-cleaning oven. You don't really have to do much, but occasionally you have to do quite a bit there. If there's charts to be written, that's what I'm going to do. Occasionally, I'm asked to write the set list for the entire tour, and then maybe they'll make some adjustments to it. They may ask me to do specific arrangements. Like I've got 2 totally unique arrangements of Rascal Flatts songs that I'm working out with Gary right now for a special that we're going to be doing, where they want some kind of remixed versions of the songs. And so I've got 2 different arrangements. I've done a cappella versions of Rascal Flatts songs with all of the Rascal Flatts guys, and the band guys singing. I've done marching band arrangements of songs so that a marching band could play along with us. I've done choir arrangements. I mean, when we do live recordings, a lot of times those recordings get filtered through me, and I end up being sort of an executive producer on the tracks, making sure that everything is quality. There's no wrong notes. Everything's like the vocals in tune, that sort of thing. It's a pretty all-encompassing list, and I think the last thing that I have to do is, and this is kind of funny, it's just the idea that I am also the buffer between what Rascal Flatts, or in this case now with Gary Levox, the lead singer that I'm playing with right now. I'm the buffer between Gary and the band, and between the band and Gary. So if the band has beef, they've got a problem with something, I try to solve it internally, and then, if there's something that maybe comes down from management that sounds harsh, I can take it and I can, kind of shave the edges off it so it doesn't sound so harsh, but yet I'm still getting the message, trying to keep everybody happy. It's like I said, it's a pretty all-encompassing job. It's musical and it's managerial, but I like it.
Yeah, and again, there's quite a few things that I kind of want to take away from there. Especially the keep everybody happy phrase. When you're working at your level, it's obviously, like you say, you can become a buffer between sort of the main people or the management and then the hired guns, if you will. Let's talk band politics and just ups and downs in bands in general. And I'm not necessarily meaning Rascal Flatts or Gary or anything like that. You've been doing this a while. I'm sure you've experienced a few tense moments. We don't necessarily have to go into detail, but just, you might have covered a little bit about it there when you said talking about things internally already. But for bands that might listen to this podcast, or up-and-coming bands that maybe are having problems who listen to this podcast, etc., what are some tips or what are some pieces of advice that you might be able to share that might allow a band to defuse a situation before it just implodes, like many bands do?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing to remember is that, we are professionals. We are the professionals. This is not a hobby. It's not a game. I'm as serious about my craft as I would hope that a nuclear physicist would be about theirs. I take it that seriously. I'm not a drinker. I'm not a smoker. I don't do drugs. That's just me. I don't even have any judgment on any of that stuff. And I'm not saying if somebody said, hey, do a shot with me, I don't have a problem with that. I could do it. I think it's disgusting, but I have no moral problem with it. But the fact is, I'm just not that interested in that stuff is really the truth as to why I'm not into it. I just want to be able to perform on a super high level, and be mindful of my professionalism. And I think if people can remember that, hey, we are here to get the job done, to deliver the mail, whatever it is. to drive the bus down the road, whatever analogy you want. We are here for business. And yet within that, we get to have this incredible musical experience. But, we also have expectations on us that, people are looking for a great show, and I'm trying to do the best thing that I can do to help deliver that. I would say a good piece of advice for side people like myself, and this isn't just coming from the Rascal Flatts thing, but other things that I've seen with people that work for particular artists that I can think of right now. And that is, don't let yourself get too close to the artist, to a place where you are mistakenly think that your friendship is more valuable than the professional boundaries that you probably need to have. I've seen people get fired because they got too comfortable around a person, because that artist let them get too comfortable, and then they said something like disparaging or embarrassing in front of that artist, because they think that it's like they forgot themselves. They forgot that they just work there and that we're all replaceable. And sometimes people get complacent because they think, well, so-and-so and I, the artist, are friends. I'll never, he'll never fire me. Well, if you get in that situation, you're usually the first in line to be getting fired. So maintaining some professional distance there is always a good thing. Even with artists that I'm friends with, I still try to remain, professionally a little bit distant, so that our lives are not so intermingled that, hey, just stay over my place tonight. And then, they're drunk, and then, and then we're having an argument, and then it turns into this crazy thing. And it's like, why am I in this position? You shouldn't be over here. We shouldn't be talking about this. Not at 4 a.m. I'd say, like, there's just some professional distance, I think, is usually a good thing to have.
Yeah, that's great advice, actually. Very, very good. Inspiring stuff. And I love the fact that, without trying to sound like I'm blowing up your ego or anything like that, you can feel the passion for being a professional come through. So big ups to you, man. That's really inspiring stuff. We're going to move on. So bit of a weird question. But with your knowledge and your know-how and your expertise, if you were to launch a band in 2023, with all the changes that you've seen over the decades of your career and so on, what would your strategy or your approach be to trying to launch a band or an artist now?
Yeah, it's really hard, my expertise has ended up being something a little bit different than that. My strategy when I moved to Nashville was pretty particular. And this is what it was. I was like, okay, there's lots of studio musicians, and they're putting out these records on artists every day. And then every day, those artists are kind of being born out into the industry, and they don't have a drummer. I was like, that's just like an opportunity. This new artist, they're going to be looking for the best new drummer they can find. So I was like, I'm going to try to go there. I wasn't trying to be an artist. I wasn't trying to be necessarily a band member. I was trying initially to be a side person, a hired gun.
Yeah.
And so that was my strategy. And it actually worked, perfectly. It's exactly what happened. So the next step is that, I do a lot of, recording at home. I, record for people, all around the world. I love making music. I love producing music. I love working on music. I don't know anything about, promoting a band in like on the highest level. I don't know anything about, I'm not really good at shopping, for label deals. I don't know anything about radio promotion. All I know, and I'm not saying this is good or bad, I'm just being transparent with you and your audience.
Yeah.
All I know is I know how to make great music. And usually in my mind, when I'm producing an artist or I'm working for someone, my goal is, I just want to make the best music possible. I want to like, I think about making the music as the ultimate goal, because once we make the music, no one can take it away from us. And at that point, it doesn't matter whether it was a number one hit or whether not that many people heard it, or whether it could have been a number one hit, but the label was going through a funny thing, and so then it wasn't. All of that stuff is that ends up being just politics, and it really, that is less important to me. I think it's more important to make music that we're really super proud of, and then we could play it for people and they'll go, that's amazing. And whether they've heard it before or whether they've never heard it before, I always want the music that I make to be the thing that I can stand behind and be most proud of. And I'm less concerned with the marketing of it on a mass scale. And I know that's easy to say because, obviously, playing with Rascal Flatts, was able to be involved in stuff on a hugely successful level. But to me, in the creation of music, that's never been a priority for me. It's always been about making quality music. And then, whatever happens with it after that is what happens with it.
That's cool as well. And funny enough, you're the second person out of the guests that I've spoken to thus far to say that should be the goal. Focus on the art, focus on the music, and after that, what happens, happens. So I'm going to slightly twist the question, the previous one, not to make you repeat yourself in any way or shape or form, but just to maybe sort of see what your approach would be in this regard. So if we take the band away and we take someone like yourself, back in the day, you want to move to a city like Nashville. Now, this for sake of the question, it can be any city that somebody's got in mind. Now, I know that your goal was to play with artists who needed drummers and stuff. What would your approach be as a drummer or a musician? It doesn't matter what the instrument is, moving to a new place, trying to network and get out there so that you could potentially work your way to work with such high caliber professionals?
Yeah, that's exactly my story. And what I try to tell people that are on their journey, I said, listen, I'm going to tell you some things, and then you have to understand that time is like a wormhole that closes behind us. You can't go down the same path I went down because it no longer exists, because the world that we came up in doesn't exist. It's a new world now. However, there are things you can learn from the things that I did that will apply to today's world very clearly. And I've always said that, listen, you could drop me in Indonesia and, I'm going to do whatever I can to try to make a living with my musical skills. And it's going to be the same whether I'm in, Indonesia or I'm in Nashville or New Orleans or, Quebec. And that is that you build a good reputation, a stellar reputation, one gig at a time, one sit-in at a time, one conversation at a time. When I moved to Nashville, let's move ahead a couple weeks, and I had some gigs. I had 2 gigs a week. If I had 2 gigs a week, and my first 2 gigs were on Sunday and Monday night, that meant it was my job to go out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Not to party, but to network and to meet people and to sit in and to watch people that were doing it at a really high level and not think enviously, gosh, I'm better than them, but try to go, you know what? What are they doing that people are so attracted to? And whatever they're doing, that's probably a good thing. And you should learn that. And, whether that's something that could have been learned in a a university setting, or whether that's something that really just has to be learned from doing it in a club, you know, I was interested in that. And I was, it was never about, I think people make this classic mistake where they're like, well, I'm better than that person, I should be the one playing. Well, there's a lot more at stake than just your abilities. There's a lot more at play. There's, just how you deal with people, how you prepare, whether you show up on time, whether you have gear that's, acceptable from a professional level. And more importantly, if you know how to use that gear to its fullest, getting great sounds, whether we're talking acoustic or being able to do electronics or being able to, program or being able to run tracks, or being able to create custom click tracks and, any of that kind of stuff. So I would first be networking, meeting people and playing gigs. And, what I wasn't doing is, making press kits. And now these days, it does pay to have a good and positive social media presence. I hired one of the guys that plays with Rascal Flatts because I was looking for somebody new. I asked for recommendations. And then when they recommended people, I went on their Instagram and YouTube page and I watched them play. And from that, I found a couple of guys that I really liked, and they're both playing with me this weekend with Gary.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Now, one of them is a sub. One of them is subbing with us this weekend for our primary guitar player, and one of them is with us all the time. And both of those guys I found through social media. So inevitably, social media is a part. That is our electronic press kit. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That's the new electronic press kit. So the other doesn't exist anymore. Social media presence has to at least exist to some degree. But yeah, for me, I'm still pretty old school, man. I want to go out there and jam and let people hear me. And then when it comes to recording, this is how I got started with like my recording stuff that I was started doing at home. I called my best friend I grew up with and I said, hey, send me some songs. I'll just record them for free and send them back. And he said, okay. He sent me the songs and it gave me something to work on. It gave me something I have to download off the internet. I have to load into my own workspace. Then I have to record my drums. Then I have to make sure that I have the drums sounding great. Then I have to know how to export them correctly. Then I need to know how to put them in a file system to be able to send them to him properly. And all of that stuff is stuff I was doing for free because why would anybody pay me to do it when I didn't know what the hell I was doing? So it was really a great opportunity. And then at that point, I was just like, okay, I just got to jump into this. And I just started to be really humble about it and was willing to work for not very much money. And once people figured out, what I could do, I would accessorize my my offerings. So if someone was saying, hey, your drum track is incredible, I said, well, you know what? I can put bass on this track right now. And if you want, I've got really great guitar people, keyboard people. I can get this so that your whole track is ready to mix. And they'll go, really? Yeah. And then, then I'm practically, producing their product and having, and that's something, I'll be doing, I think tomorrow I got to work on a project.
That's awesome. And a great idea as well, because I think a lot of the people who do the remote drumming thing, they just do the remote drumming thing. The fact that you're offering essentially a band in a box is incredible. Great idea.
Yeah. Now, it'd be great if I could play everything myself. I got to sublease some of that stuff, but basically, I use people that I think are great, and then I upcharge their services. So even though I'm not doing their services, I'm still making money on their services. And then the more stuff I can do myself, like the drumming and the percussion and bass on some songs. I have to know my limitations, but there's certain things I feel very comfortable playing. And then I also offer, background vocals, which I can do myself. And I've got my wife, who's also a really great singer. And so I can offer background vocal packages. As a matter of fact, the only tracks I've got on a couple of songs out with Gary right now is we have some background vocals, and they're all background vocals I did here at home.
That's incredible. Jim, I want to kind of, mix the questions I have prepared a little bit with what you've sort of said in the last couple of things. You mentioned, having a social media presence is a good thing. And you also mentioned that the world that is currently what it is isn't the same world that you came up in. So I want to try, if possible, keep it positive. And you sound like you're quite a positive guy, so I don't imagine we'll go down a dark path. But, typically when I have these discussions with musicians about the internet and how things have affected music, there's a couple negatives that always seem to come up, which, it is what it is. We're not all Mark Zuckerbergs and those kinds of guys. We can't change everything, or at least I know I can't. So I'm a big believer of adapt or die kind of situations.
Yeah.
That being said, you've just mentioned a couple things, like with the remote recording and finding depths or subs with like Instagram accounts and stuff like that. But what are some of the other positives, if any, that you think have come along with the modern state of music? So like, I know that you've mentioned two very strong ones already, so I'm not trying to force you to think of more.
No, I've got plenty. So, it's interesting. I could look at something and I could call it a positive, and I know that Steve Lukather would call it a negative. And that is that I'll make the same statement, and both of us have an opposite opinion on it. Anyone can make a record now. Now, I've heard interviews with Steve, and he's like, that's the problem, is anybody can make a record now. And it used to, I think he felt like, like it was almost like records were vetted. It was the professionals making records. And I'm going, you know what? Who's to say, who should be making records and who shouldn't? Why should there be a gatekeeper? I look at, I know it's a tired example, but, Billie Eilish and Phineas.
Oh yeah, incredible record.
They're making incredible music, and yes, they made most of it in their bedroom. And yes, I know it was mixed by world-class engineers, but why wouldn't you? But the point is that anyone can make music, and I think that is very inspiring. I think that we have more tools at our disposal that we wish we always had. When I would take lessons when I was young, one of the first pieces of advice I got was record yourself playing. So I took my little tape deck with the two little buttons that were next to each other, and you hit the tape deck and you record and play at the same time, and then you're recording. And, now I've got this incredible Pro Tools thing I've got, four cameras. Mine are 1080p, but everyone could have 4K too. So I can record at almost touch of exactly two buttons, and it could be one if I wanted. I can record high definition audio, high definition video, and I can make an incredible video to share with the world in under an hour.
Wow.
And it's amazing. And so the technology is incredible. There's a lot of people that kind of came up through just kind of being sensations on the internet, but I feel like in a lot of cases, it's more like just the cream rising to the top, like there's a billion people putting their songs out on the radio. So why did these people rise up? Why are they so crazy about these people? Because they're actually pretty incredible. And this has just given them their opportunity.
Yeah.
A drummer that a lot of us admire, is Annika Niles.
Yeah.
Annika, I mean, let's call reality. I mean, she was an internet sensation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she was someone everybody watched on YouTube. But the thing is she's an amazing world-class drummer. Her teacher is a guy named Joost Nickel, who's also incredible. And she's just got the goods, man. She's not like the best female drummer. She's one of the best drummers, on the planet. She's a really great musician. And her internet success has translated into, success in more traditional ways. I mean, we saw that, she was out, touring with Jeff Beck on his last tour. I mean, that's amazing. Now, I don't even think these young internet people need that to be validated. I mean, there are kids, honestly, man, I got a kid that's studying with me at Belmont that just quit at school because he's got 1 million followers on TikTok.
Wow.
1 million.
Yeah, I mean, that's big business now,
And so, like, he's making enough money. I mean, he's making a living just drumming on TikTok. And so it kind of makes guys like us, maybe I'm young, you're younger than I am, but still we're a lot older than this kid. And like, it makes us reevaluate, well, what is making it in the music business? What does it mean to have a music career? Because clearly he has one. He's making, he might be making, $5,000 a month on TikTok, just playing drums. And, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. And from what I've heard, and I don't know, because I'm obviously not a TikTok guy, but from what I've heard, some of those guys, when you start getting into that sort of number in terms of followers, your influence is so great that you can make up to 6 figures per post, depending on who's sponsoring that post. So I mean, like, if a guy like that, plays his cards right, even if TikTok or whatever the social medias are that make these people famous, even if they eventually phase out, I mean, he could potentially have enough money from that to take him onto whatever his next journey is. It's incredible stuff.
Yeah. So it kind of redefines, the idea of success. But ultimately, for me, in the music business, success has always been, if I can make a living doing what I love, and in parentheses, kind of only what I love, because that's pretty much what I do. It's just I make music, I teach music, I write music, I've written about music. I mean, that's all I do is just music stuff. And if I can make a living doing the stuff that I love and support my family, then to me, that's the definition of success. And so when I talk to some person who's playing on a local level and they're teaching a bunch of students and they're playing a bunch of live gigs and they're doing the same thing, they're just playing music and supporting themselves and their family, I go, man, you are literally just as successful as I am.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that, I've had a little bit more light on me at times, because I've been, on TV or, featured in magazines or whatever, back when magazines mattered, which they don't now. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of people that, discovered me on Drumeo, I mean, so, all of those things are really important, but they don't change the fact that if someone's just making a living in New Orleans or wherever playing music, to me, that's success.
Yeah. So on that note, second last question, Jim, you've achieved massive success as a musician. You've been in the magazines. You were voted best country drummer by Modern Drummer magazine back in 2017. You've had
a lot.
hits.
It's funny. It was a lot of years. I only know this because I'm in the room with those awards right now. So it was. Let me look here. I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. So it was 2009 Clinician of the Year, 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 17 Country Drummer of the Year.
Yeah, I mean,
Kinda
incredible.
crazy. I just happened to be in the room with those things. I said, "Oh, I wouldn't have known that unless I was looking at them."
No,
But
but
there they were.
that's amazing. So I mean, you've done the touring thing, you've done the magazine thing, you've done the TV thing, you play on all these things. Long story short, massive success. So firstly, congratulations. But here comes the question part. Obviously, music is a tough career. Everybody who's ever tried to do it understands that there's more people that seem to quit it each year that take it on. It's a very interesting vocation. I've always been fascinated by the process. I'm imagining that at times, especially the move from Mark and the move from Kansas and some of the stuff that you already mentioned, I'm imagining at times things got a little tough. And if you're anything like some of the musicians I've spoken to already, or myself, I imagine that at times there were mind games in your own head that made you wonder if some of the sacrifice was worth it. Now, again, I'm hyper phrasing here, so if not, my apologies. But let's assume that these things happened. Were there ever times that you thought about getting out of music or quitting, maybe trying something else? And if there were, how did you overcome those thoughts?
So you are forgetting my neurosis, which is I don't think that anything bad can ever happen.
Yes.
So I was walking out on the tightrope, like knowing that it was going to work out. Now, if it didn't work out, I guess I'd have been really disillusioned. But it's amazing how when you walk without fear, how far you can actually get. So I never once thought, you know what, I'm really wondering whether I should do this music thing as a career. I mean, not since I was 6 years old did I have any questions about that. I knew I was going to be a musician before I played an instrument. That's weird, but that's a fact. I always knew that this is what I wanted to do. This was my goal. It's pretty well documented. You can find little spots, where a high school interview or a little paper from when I was in kindergarten. I mean, this is what I wanted to do. So when I moved to Nashville, I ended up, this is not over dramatizing it too much. I was literally homeless. And I was gigging, but I did not technically have any place to live. So I was living in my truck. And at that point, I was like, I am absolutely where I'm supposed to be. I am doing the right thing. I had a lot of confidence in myself. I had a lot of confidence in what I wanted to do. And I never questioned whether this was what I should do. And I mean, even like when the pandemic happened, I went from having one of the best jobs in Nashville playing with Rascal Flatts to Rascal Flatts breaking up. And you don't have that job anymore. And I never once was like, oh God, what am I going to do? I'm going to do what I do every day, which is I pick up drumsticks and I pick up musical instruments and I try to figure out how to make a living with it. And you know what? Somehow I just do that every day. And I don't really sit here and try to calculate how much money I'm going to make. But the amount that I like being busy ends up making it so that I can make plenty enough money to be able to survive and to feed my family and then some, with what I'm doing. I'll tell everybody, this is really interesting. When we got to the pandemic and my Rascal Flatts salary was gone, which is basically six-figure salary, just gone. So picture you losing a six-figure salary, and now you're going, okay, now what am I going to do? It's gone. So this was my formula. I said, okay. And this, I'll be transparent about these numbers because anyone who called me, let's say they wanted to take a drum lesson with me, online or in person, my lesson rate is $100. Now, we could talk about that a lot. We could talk about whether that's a lot or a little, but I'll save that for another conversation. So I charge $100 for a lesson. I also charge between 100 and 200 for a drum track, but a lot of times I'm just charging $100. Why so cheap? Because I can get the track done pretty quick, and still I'm basically making $100 an hour. So my formula for the pandemic going forward was this: if I do 3 things a day, 6 days a week, 48 weeks a year, I'll make like, I can't remember, it was like $83,000 or $86,000. And I went, can I live off of that? Mm-hmm. Yep, I can. So if I work more, I'll make more. But if I find myself working less, then I'm going to make less. So every day I wake up and I'm not doing 3 things, like today I taught 3 drum lessons and I did a drum track. So I did 4 things today. So that's $400 today. You know, if I'm doing, and that's not counting even touring with Gary or playing with, teaching at Belmont or whatever. I mean, I still am under this kind of hungry mentality, like, hey, what are the 3 things you're going to do today? And I'm, yeah, okay, I'm going to teach lessons, or I'm going to, that's just my programming. So as a result, I mean, I'm not like a money guy, but, money's just not really an issue. I'm making enough money that, I just do the work. I just do the work every day, and the money stuff kind of takes care of itself.
That's awesome, man. Jim, last question. I ask all my guests. Some people seem to need a couple seconds. If you do, that's okay. What do you think has been the best piece of advice you've ever received in regards to your music career?
One of the best pieces of advice I ever received was when I was in college, and it was given to me a couple of different times by successful touring and recording drummers, and it was this. It was practice while you still have time, because when you become a professional and then maybe you're married and you have a family and all of that stuff comes into play, you just don't have the time to practice. So if you're young and you're single and you're working, or you're in a period of your life where you can afford to dedicate the time to practicing, you should do it, because there will be a season where you're just going to be too busy. People ask me about practicing all the time. I say, you know what? The most rewarding practice I have right now is getting to spend time with my students. It's because when I'm spending time with my students, what I'm realizing is it makes me reprioritize what is the most important in my career. If I'm talking to them about their time or their quality of sound, or their hands, it's reaffirming those things in my own playing. And so the time that I spend with my students, I consider practice time. Occasionally, I will teach my students stuff that I'm having problems with myself. I go, hey, listen, I wrote this exercise because this is kicking my ass. And you know what? We're going to work it out together.
That's cool.
But yeah, so I think about that. I think about, practice while you've got the time, particularly if you're young. And I think that was something I definitely took to heart, and I definitely understand now as a professional with, a family and a career.
Yeah. Sweet. Jim Riley, that was excellent, man. Thank you. I feel like we barely touched the surface. I've got a couple more questions I could ask, but I want to be respectful of your time. Maybe we can get you back on sometime if you'd be up for it. But for now,
I would be.
I'll put all your links in the show notes, and I just can't thank you enough, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always my pleasure to talk shop about music and drumming in my career, and that's one of the great passions of my life. So I'm happy to share that with you guys.
Awesome, man. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye.
There we have it, everybody. The one and only Mr. Jim Riley. Make sure you check out Jim at jimrileymusic.com. You can find out more about the Musician's Mentor at musicians-mentor.com. My name is Travis Mark. You can find out more about me at travismark.com. And I know I said it at the top of the interview, but please leave me a rating or review on your preferred streaming service. it definitely affects the algorithms on things like Spotify and Apple and Amazon. So please, it's super helpful. Thank you. Until next time, keep pushing, keep practicing. I believe in you. You should believe in you too. Peace.